So I wanted to bring up a couple of guys, Spencer Singer and Mike Sampson. Just really quickly, if you could just, Mike, just talk about your background a little bit and how you got started and where you are now.
Well, I started about 25 years ago in fashion. The true segue from life insurance to fashion. I don't know how that happened, but it just happened that way. Started off in leather goods and worked there for about 6 years, about 80 sales reps. Salesman of the Year 2 years in a row. Had a passion for sales and fashion from that day forward, and then moved on to open up a headwear brand called Black Headwear. It was 5 years of that business, and I actually did one of the pool shows back in the day, so I kind of know what you guys are going through. But it was a very small headwear brand, which we eventually sold, and then I turned into brand manager at Joseph Abboud Leather Goods, and then moved on to trade shows. I've been in trade shows for about 10 years, just kind of sum that up. And I run a men's division under our president, and also an elite program for our top elite 50 key exhibitors throughout the show.
Spencer?
I started my career in fashion in retail, so I come from the retail side. I worked for a chain called Scoop, which is still around today, and they were kind of like a pioneer of, on-trend fashion, bringing more of a one-stop shop to the retail consumer with a boutique feel. Then from there, I continued my career with brands like Missoni, Billy Reed, and I managed a lot of their stores in New York City. And then when I was at Billy Reed, I transitioned into the wholesale arena, and I launched their brand, which is now currently in all major department stores and retailers. And then from there, I was asked to relaunch Gant, which is a menswear brand. It's been around since 1949, and we just relaunched Gant in the States about 3 years ago, and I managed Gant, Gant Rugger, and Gant by Michael Bastian. And then about 3 months ago, I've come on board to the trade show side. Yeah, it's definitely different. I really enjoy it. I had the opportunity to work with some great people, and what Project is doing now, I run sales for Project Men's, and what they're doing now is they're bringing on people who have industry experience as opposed to just being a salesperson and things like that. So, and I think it's across all arenas with UBM and Pool and everybody. It's kind of what we're doing now. So, yeah, that's my story.
It's awesome, guys. So just to start off, Mike, just to really bringing it back, big picture question. What would you say, just a couple of things that make a brand successful generally, just starting out?
Well, for me, there's a lot of things, but two really core things, and that is understanding what your mission statement is, really what's your message, and really it's got to be a mantra. It's got to be really what you're trying to deliver from personally to market, and you live by that every day. And then secondly, understanding and staying true to your core competency, which is your product and what you're designing and why you're designing it. So hold on to that. When I was at Black Headwear, my partner, who was a designer, was designing. The product was very it was preppy. It was a little kind of south. It was basically surf in the city kind of a feel, but at the time it was a very urban attraction to that product line. So we started designing product towards that market, and that's the last thing you want to do. They wanted you for what your core competency is. You stick to that and you move forward with that.
Right on. So, going and dialing in a little bit, what would you say is important for a brand how they decide what their target retailer is when they're doing wholesale?
Well, when I first started off selling, right off the bat, you pretty much think you could sell everybody, but you've got to get inside the stores and see what they're showing. And if your product fits, and I call that touring the store. Go tour the store and see if there's a void in there that you could fill. If there's no void, then you can't fill it. You're in the wrong store. Go in there and see where you could find some space on that floor, and then eventually get in there to set an appointment, and then basically show up and show them. I mean, it's as simple as that.
So flipping over to selling and showrooms and reps, Spencer. How would you say it's important for a brand to be in a brick and mortar showroom?
I think if a brand doesn't have the resources on their own to get out and be on the road and be exposed to the market, I would say a showroom or a rep. There's good and bad about all of that, and I think a lot of the brands here probably, you know, lean towards the showrooms and the reps, and you know, it's important if you have the right guy or the right team leading that charge. You know, a showroom could take you on as a brand and, you know, charge you the, you know, the showroom fee plus commission, and, you know, it's really just them paying their rent, and, you know, it all depends what kind of brands you have. So I think there's good and bad for showrooms. When I just recently exited Gant, we took on 3 showrooms across the country to pick up the slack, and, you know, in-house will handle the major department stores and the operations. But I think one thing that's important when trying to find a showroom, see what brands they already have, get the references, see what stores they're in. It's look at those brands and say, okay, they have Joe's Socks or whatever it is, and all right, well, what retailers are they selling? Do they have the relationships that you need, that you see your brand fitting in? Are they going to be a good ambassador? I think that's a really, you know, are they going to send, you know, because we're in this because we love it. You know, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. You know, we're not in to be millionaires. It's very hard. You know, like we are in it because we love clothes, we love product. So are they going to tell your story? Are they going to tell the same story that you're trying to put out there, the message that you're trying to convey? I think is super important when looking for a showroom. I think I'm getting off the subject, but a key things to look for: who are the brands that you're going to be sitting with in their showroom? How many people are in their showroom? Is it a 2-man showroom? If it is, and they have 8 brands, they're not going to be able to manage the business because you can't do it with 1 or 2 people on your own. And if they have 4 brands, it's not going to work. 8 brands, whatever. But there's also reps. I think I'm going off but there's showrooms and there's reps. You know, you have a question? Yes. Sorry.
Could you come up to the mic?
Yeah, I can't hear anything. Yeah, it's not something you can like Google, which is kind of, you know, you can Google everything. I think it's about being out into the market, being out in the market, being at other trade shows, and kind of, you know, talking to your peers and people who are doing the same thing. And a lot of it is, you know, a lot of this business is a lot of relationships and building off that. So again, you know, finding a rep, you know, that's tricky because they're independent and they're always on the road, they're all over the place. I think when you're trying to do that, finding a rep, I think it's a lot of word of mouth and trusting, you know, the person who's telling you, you know, hey, John's a great guy, you should really work with him. I know he works with X, Y, and Z, right?
Right. Now, to that point also, you know, you here in LA? Okay. So get to the market center. You know, walk the showrooms and see what products in there. And again, like touring the store, tour the showroom as well, and look at the activity during market. If they're busy, if they have appointments set, you know they're doing their homework, because you want to make sure these guys are going to not only represent your product well, but also, you know, get the retailers into the store to sell the product. Because if not, you're just paying the showroom space, and you're losing that down. But you know, it's important to know also, interview them a little bit to find out how often they get outside the showroom. You know, back in the day, I mean, even with Spence, I was on the road every day, and I was putting 50,000 miles a year on my car. And I loved it because I didn't know any other way to do it. But people get a little lazy these days, too. They're sitting in showrooms and they're waiting for the retailers to come to them. So it's important you get out there and check out what's happening on that home front.
I kind of, I think right now with a lot of these online platforms like New Order and Jure, Shop the Floor, I feel like they're still at a point where I mean, some of the smaller shops are using it because they don't know also how to get a hold of product, and they're not connected or tied into the industry like some other buyers are. So I think it's good for them. I think on the brand side, I used Jure at Gant and I switched over to it, and what I loved about it is it made my life easier as far as, you know, putting my line sheets up, seeing what's trending, what's selling, what people are taking notes on. I used it more as a tool. I think it's starting now more and more to be used as an online marketplace, but I think it's really a helpful tool for the vendor and the brand to kind of help manage their business on you know, if you're a smaller business and you don't have huge infrastructures and things like that, it's just a kind of, it's a great investment, I think. And a lot of those sites are very willing, they're very willing to help you, like, take photos of your images and things like that. You could get a lot out of those online marketplaces, and it exposes you to a whole bunch of buyers that, you know, they could be scrolling through and looking for jewelry brands or, you know, t-shirt brands or, you know, exotic scarves or whatever it is, and, you know, come across your, you know, your brand. And I found that even with a big brand like Gant, I mean, we were $1 billion business globally. But, you know, in the US we were a smaller marketplace, but still, like, people were discovering. It's definitely a place for discovery. I just don't know if it's, you know, where it needs to be as far as a marketplace, but I think as a tool, those things are great.
Technology is getting better with that every day, but, you know, as Spencer was saying, it's also very good to bridge between the shows. When you're in between shows, it's a good bridge between as well. So, it, you know, out of sight, out of mind kind of concept, it's more than helpful.
Yeah, like we have one with Project, and I don't know, does it go with Pool as well, Shop the Floor? Yeah. Right, so through all of our shows, we have a online marketplace showroom called Shop the Floor, and I think that is a great platform if you're kind of just venturing into that world and you want to discover it. Because currently, right now, it's free. It's free to all of our exhibitors. So it's one of those things you should really take advantage of. It, you know, takes a few minutes to collect some images, you know, submit them, fill out the information, and then you're on this portal that is exposed to every retailer that walks through our show, all the brands, and you have just like, whether, you know, a lot of, you know, people think, oh, if I do it, I have to put my whole collection on, I don't have it ready. You know, even just to get some lifestyle images up and just something that represents the brand, it will catch the eye, because if the buyer or the retailer is on the, you know, they go onto Shop the Floor and they're trying to find brands for the show, you know, if they go to your showroom and there's nothing there, then they're like, oh, these guys must not be legit, or their name's there. So I think it's super important and super easy, and it's free. That's the great thing. Yes, ma'am. If you can project, I can try to hear.
No, Nick, let's go to the microphone so everybody can hear. And just quickly, it is a good point that if you're going to get on there, upload something.
Yeah,
don't
as much as you can.
Don't
And maintain it.
and maintain it.
Yeah, I think you know, if you do it, it goes a long way. I mean, whether it's our platform or someone else's, I think they're definitely very helpful.
So my question is, when do you start registering your brand name? What stage?
In what way are you talking?
Like trademarking?
Well, I mean, that's probably one of the first things you should start doing to protect the brand name as well. In fact, my wife is actually going through that process right now with her jewelry company, and it's, you know, contact, if you have an accountant, speak with them. There are trademark attorneys you should be involved with. You could do it on your own online, but it's not as safe. It's very, very inexpensive to have somebody do it. It's a quick form letter, and you apply through them, and it costs you a couple $100. But I would do that right away.
I spoke with some attorneys, and it's over $1,000 to do it. And some of my friends who are like already have their brands said maybe you should first get the product out and then start registering once there's traction.
Well, I mean, to me, that's putting the cart ahead of the horse a little bit. But, you know, I would shop around a little bit to find out, because it really shouldn't be that expensive. I would protect your brand name before you start putting it out there and somebody else gets credit for it.
Okay, and then once you have the feeling that you found a void, as you mentioned it, you found a gap. Do you have any tricks how to talk with your target audience, like how to find them, how to find a bigger pool than the maybe 20, 30 people you've seen walking around, like carrying that trend you're on?
You're saying, how can you find more buyers and more retailers, like, to be exposed to your brand? Is that?
How do you find your target audience?
Okay. I would say look at who your competitors are, and who do you think you sit next to in a big retail store. Find those brands, see what stores they're in. It could be a whole other point, like 20 points of distribution that you didn't know about. And as far as the consumer, I think I think as a brand you need to know your consumer going into it.
What's your product, by the way?
It's socks.
Socks.
Okay, and
Fashion socks.
tell me about them. What?
I come from an advertising background, so as an ACP works for international brands.
Okay.
Big fashion brands. It's a very conceptual brand. So it's a mind-changing formula for socks. As like this, hopefully we'll see it soon. So I see this trend, but there's not a lot of people doing it.
Okay. So, you got to do research. You get online and look at different hosiery companies and retailers that carry that. I mean, is this something that you're looking at getting Urban Outfitters, or is it a Nordstrom, or is it a small boutique, independent boutiques? Go online and look to see who's carrying what. Like Spencer said, they're your competitors as well. Find out, get on their websites and look at their stockists, look at their stores that they're selling. And then images, go to the press and see who's wearing the product and what cities. That's how you're going to kind of forensically target your market. Okay, and then everything else will kind of fall into place at that point.
Any other questions on any of those initial subjects? One other thing I want to ask, not to keep on harping on this, but what's the difference, would you say, first, Mike, between a rep and a showroom? Like if a brand goes out and gets their own rep, or if they seek out a showroom, and maybe what's better for an emerging brand to start with?
Well, I mean, the way I look at it, a rep is somebody who's going to represent your line exclusively. And that means they're going to pay attention to your product and your product only. When you go to a showroom, they might have anywhere from 5 to 10 brands in there. And I'll tell you, the good showrooms will show your product, but when they go through their tour to see the stores, they carry all the products in. There's a certain routine of how they show the product. The good reps will show what's new first. And that's the difference, is that if you find a good rep, they will show the new product first because it's new and exciting. And then the open to buy is there, and the retailer's attention is there, and they're not too tired. But the independent rep is going to be the brand ambassador, and that's all he's going to live and breathe. So that's the difference I see between the two.
Spencer, what would you say is a financial deal between a brand and a showroom, and a brand and a rep that would be average or normal?
Yeah, most showrooms now, and I kind of did some research when I was at Gantt, we were looking for people. Some showrooms they'll have a showroom fee plus a commission. They'll also expect you to pay for the trade show booth as well. I think, if they start with a showroom fee, I think it's sometimes a red flag because it's their focus, and they're trying to make their I'd rather not do a showroom fee and do a higher commission to give them more incentive to sell your product. But if you are going to pay a showroom fee, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, it all depends on the showroom. There's some great showrooms out there. Guys who are geeked out about product, who want to get it out there, who want to show that your stuff. Right. And then there's guys who just it's a hustle, it's a grind. They're in and out with brands, and they have one that they've been working on forever, and then just others to sprinkle around it to make it look busy.
Yeah, I mean, look, how many of you guys out there are looking for showrooms, or you're looking to sell the product yourself? Showrooms? Okay, so you're actively looking for showrooms right now, and you want to place the product there. That's okay. That's a lot. I mean, honestly, have you gone out and sold the product yourself to the stores yet? Okay, so you see where the traction is, and you've already got a plan for that. Good.
I'll touch on the financials. Like average right now, showroom fee, it would, depending on how much space you take. But if it's a collection, you're going to look anywhere from $1,000 to $1,200.
Yeah, and it all depends on the rent of the space as well.
If it's more than that, it's wrong. I mean, you shouldn't be paying more than $1,200. I like it to be around $800 to $1,000
a month.
Yeah, and commissions. It all depends. Find out what their relationships are. You could also say, okay, if we hit this mark, you scale it. Start off at 8%, and if we hit this number, anything after that, 10%. But you're looking anywhere between, I would say, on average, For someone who's good, 10 to 12% commission. But again, I think commission gives them that incentive, especially with a rep. I think that's where you'll get them. And I think as far as commission, don't do I wouldn't recommend. I think it's a draw commission. I would say, right?
I agree 100%.
I would say that it's less incentive. If you're,
It's less incentive for them to get out and sell the product. They're collecting a monthly stipend, and
Correct.
they'll get the business, so they're going to balance out their draw.
So you guys are talking about draw against commission, right?
Right, which is basically advancing them their commission before they make it.
Correct.
So, again, that's kind of like paying the showroom fee.
Yeah, and that's someone in my opinion, and that's just my opinion, whose business isn't steady enough, and they need that, and it's hard when you're, just starting out, and maybe that guy's just starting out. But when it comes to showrooms or reps, you got to go with the guy who has the relationships. The guy who can at least get you in front of, Jason from Trunk Club or Tina from Nordstrom or, the Forum Group or someone, and all depends on their territories and their areas. But there's nothing wrong with showrooms. There's a lot of great ones. There's a lot of good ones out here on the West Coast. But there's a lot of, there's a lot of small brands, and there's a lot of people trying. I would try in-house first, the best you can. Get out into the market, do a trade show yourself. When you're at these trade shows, I think one of the most important thing is networking. Meeting everybody, even if it's a brand that does the same thing you're doing. Talk to them, see what they're doing. Feel it out. I think when you create the community, it's super important, and you'll learn so much about the brands. And when I came into wholesale, I was more of a retailer, but luckily I had my twin brother who has been in the business a long time. But at my first trade show, I just started, when it was downtime, I talked to my neighbor to see what's going on, what are they doing. I met guys who've been in 25 years.
Who shops other markets, for example? Who goes to Dallas market? Who goes to Chicago? Do you guys get around and shop the different regional markets? Because that's super, super important too. For example, if it's a gift item that you're selling, the Dallas market's got a tremendous amount of showrooms. And it's a very, very Midwest regional show, just like Chicago Mart as well. Full-time showrooms in those buildings. So it's important to get out there and see where you can stick your feet in the ground besides LA. So.
Yeah. Question?
I would wait. I would wait until you have something to say tangible that's going to tell your story. Okay, so are you talking about how you're developing your brand, but you just don't have samples yet to show them?
I do have samples, but some of the samples might not be exactly. It's pretty much the same, but not exactly.
Okay. Well, I mean, then I would sit and talk with them and show them what your concept is, and then that's kind of the developmental exploration stage, really.
I just didn't want to approach before
There's a degree of waiting too. I know exactly what you're talking about. Waiting too long for the absolute perfect piece, and you get emotional with that piece, and you're like, "This is my favorite. It's amazing," and you bring it in, and they're like, "Get rid of it. I don't want it." And you can't hold on to that. Like you got to you have to bring it in and do some fact finding with them on the table and sit down and roll up your sleeves with them and just figure it out, because they've got great ideas too.
Yeah, I was wondering how much can that affect your product development? Like you use that data.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I would.
If you have enough lead time with that meeting and you're, with production, then
It's like doing trade shows in a way. You're showing the line, you're showing it as a marketing line, and you're getting feedback back from different buyers. If you bring out 100 different styles and you want to end up your SKU count to be 75, all right, you're going to find out which 25 you're going to drop at the trade shows and at the key retailers that you show it to in the beginning.
But one thing I would say, most men's is a little bit more forgiving, but women's is a little bit tougher. But you have a lot of times you have one opportunity to get in front of these buyers, and you want to have as much as possible. you could always start a conversation and reach out and say, hey, I wanted to introduce myself. I have this line that I'm working on. Here's some inspiration boards, and here's some of the fabrics we're using. But make sure it's enough content that's going to draw them in. And it's not just like, oh, I'm thinking about doing this thing. It's cool. It's going to look like this, and but have something that you could actually send them some collateral. Yeah, digital's great. And just putting it out there. It's when you actually physically meet with them to make sure that you have as much as possible to show them, and that production is tight enough where it's it's going to be impactful. Because I mean we have stuff, first set samples that come, and we have the meetings, and we know that there's in our style notes that, okay, that's actually not going to be a silver zipper. It's going to be, antique brass, and this is going to, it's going to be a split yoke on the back and not straight across, and things like that. Know what you're talking about, but it's okay to have production. If it's not the exact, what's going to be in production, but if you know what it's going to be and you can explain it well, then by all means it's fine to meet with them. Just have enough substance when you do meet them.
Yeah.
But reaching out prior and just getting an introduction going, I don't know if it's really ever too soon, because you could always reach out again. Hey, I'm just following up again. The one thing you don't want to be is, like all the time. Like if they didn't answer you the fourth time, like scale back.
And the other thing also, doing phone work and calling them on the phone, you have no idea what's going on. If there's a small independent store, what's going on in the store. If they can't come to the phone or they have an attitude, you have no idea if there's 30 people in front of them, their register's broken or whatever. Again, I'm like that old school guy. I'm not sitting there hammering out texts or emails. I'm walking in the store. Face-to-face selling is the absolute best you could do. And what I would do is when I'm driving around and I've got a car filled with 500 samples, and I see a certain store, you got to be, you got to be profiling in a way as well. If you've toured the store before without them knowing who you are, and find out where your place is there, then you come back with what I used to call my speed roll, because I sold belts back then. I'd unroll the belt roll, and I'd have my 15 of my best styles. I'd walk in and I'd roll it out on the counter. And a lot of times, if there's nobody in the store, they're going to take time to take a look if they see a tiny roll. But if you see a walk in with cases of stuff, they're like, forget it. So I think it's important to do the face-to-face.
It's harder to do that nowadays. It's not as welcomed.
Are you saying I'm old?
No. I'm just saying, it's a little bit more challenging because, the retail world and the climate now, it's tough. Stores are having a really tough time selling goods. So unless, it's just a little bit harder. You can catch them in the wrong time.
It's easier to get rid of you over the phone, though. I'll walk in every day.
So yeah,
correct.
next,
But to go in, hey, introduce yourself, develop the conversation first before coming in with all your stuff and saying, oh, hey, do you have time? Yes, ma'am.
Basically, I wanted to know, how do you estimate that, hinging on that, the amount for the trade show?
Wait, say that again?
The amount to bring, because I'll be using a install, and it's, the amount of people, how do you estimate that?
so she's doing a cash and carry, which is at pool, which
Okay.
is
Oh,
going to
okay.
be, selling.
Well, what I used to do, and with the headwear, just because basically it was kind of more geared towards that type of product, but I would bring extra samples of everything that I had, because I didn't do any marketing. I didn't do any advertising with magazines. What I would do is I'd give my samples away to tastemakers at the end of the show. And I'm not saying for you to do that, you're selling it, partially selling it, whatever, but for me, the business I got as a result of that, my hats got on Will Smith, and he wore it in Bad Boys too. And Johnny Depp in Pirates of the Caribbean, and who's Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible. So it gets out there. It gets to the stylists if you give it to the right people, doormen at clubs or whatever. I'd bring some extra sets just for that purpose, depending on what your product is. If you see somebody you think you want to gift something to, because it's going to show up eventually. But I would stack your deck with that.
Yeah, and also, plan it out a little bit. Like, what's gonna, how are you gonna, what's gonna hit you to that number that's gonna be a return on your investment? What's gonna get you over the top, and bring enough to hit that. What your goal is. You can never have too much. And depending on what type of product is, you could, you know, if it's what do you sell? Sorry. Jewelry. Okay. So jewelry, yeah, you could bring a lot, and you know, and it doesn't go out. I mean, jewelry can go out of style, but certain things. I mean, you can always. It's always better to have more, I think, in that type of in a cash and carry, because you don't know. I mean, it's like a retail store. There's no rhyme or reason why one day. You know, everyone tries to get a science on it, and I've been working for retail forever, and you know, there's no reason why one day we did 20,000 and another day we did 4, or you know, whatever the numbers are. It just happens. So you never know. But I mean, the attendees at our show, the cash and carry has become a lot. It's grown a lot since.
Yeah, well, you know what I like that you said though, that I haven't thought of is having the goal in your mind of what you need to sell to either break even or make profit.
Oh, absolutely.
And that
I mean,
should
at the end
be
of the day, it's your business.
That should be to looking at what you have.
There's a return on investment percentage that I learned back when I was first started doing trade shows, and it was the cost of doing the show should be 15% or less than the total cost. For example, if you do $100,000 in business, if it costs you 15 grand to do the show or less, that's a profitable show for you. That's a good return on investment. Okay, and you just kind of need to really kind of balance that. That's an aggressive goal, but it's a good solid goal. And that's kind of a standard ROI percentage.
Yeah. That's your goal, bro. Any other questions? Come on up. So we're going to take a couple more questions, and then we're gonna have our last segment, and then we're going to be done.
Did we have any more questions there?
Go ahead.
Okay, cool.
I do. So give me your card when you're done, because that's what my wife is doing. No, I'm saying that there's a degree of more artisan development, and that's kind of what you're doing, correct? More hand manufacturing, and then to take that to the next level to a production front is a very, very tricky and somewhat scary. You know, there's trust involved. Yeah, I know you don't get a lot of sleep. Trust me, I know it's very, very difficult, but you've got to do your due diligence and really shop those manufacturers.
So maybe you can speak a little bit about having like limited runs. You know, so if it's jewelry, right? Like something that's limited and staying within your comfort zone.
Well, that's the thing. It's like a lot of these factories, depending on where you take, but depending on the type of product it is and where it's manufactured. If it's done in China, for example, certain factories might have 200-piece minimums or whatever, kind of like how you might with a retail order that you're placing. So in a way, it's safe. You know, it's not too much quantity, and you have a plan you can get rid of it. That's why showing the production line at the show and getting a feedback from the buyers what they like and showing it to certain key retailers. If you have verbal agreements or verbal interest on certain product, you could kind of pad it by another 20%, and then if you meet that 200-piece minimum, you're kind of protected in a way. But at the end of the day, it's all going to come down to chasing down the retailers for their money.
Always be transparent in what you can do and what you can produce and how you perform.
Right.
Because if you over-promise and under-deliver, that's the last time you'll speak to anybody.
And that's the last time they'll show your product.
I don't mean to be so harsh, but that's
it's true.
It's just what it is, you know. So it's always good to be transparent and not pretend that you have something that you don't, or you're something that you're not. As far as a brand, people like small brands. People like to help nurture small brands sometimes too. So there's a certain romance about that as well. So own that.
So quickly, last subject, because I do want to get, this is an important one, just sort of like your guys' tips on how to get the attention. So instead of, say they can't get a rep and they don't have a showroom yet, but they still want to test their product out in the market and get out there, and they're coming to Pool, for instance, how do they get the attention of the buyer? How do they stand out? What are some things you saw that worked in the beginning first, Mike.
So you're talking specifically in the booth at the show?
In the booth, anywhere. Just really, it could be in the store, just at any point. What's that? Yeah, prior, after, just how do they stand out?
Exactly. I mean, honestly, the best thing to do, that's a good point, is to really, you get to do your outreach, know who your retailers are that you want to sell to, and put together any type of campaign to get it in front of them, visually, digitally, however, a virtual invite, however, just to show them where you're going to be with your booth number. And then at the show, you know, it's important. Merchandising at your booth is super important at the show. You know, Ali talked about lots of different things to do and what not to do, but, you know, make it inviting and put your product up front that you want them to see at eye level. You know, if it's headwear, don't put it on the ground. Put it at eye level. The sunglasses, eye level. Get that out there in front of the booth so they could see it. And then, you know, get out of the way and let them walk in and take a look at it.
I think when you're trying to initially reach out to the buyer, I think that's kind of what is very important. Depending on what type of buyer it is. If it's a smaller retail store, get them on the phone, call them. Mondays are great days. Mondays, most of the time with retailers, they're looking over the weekend's numbers. They're not on the show. They're not on the sales floor. They have time. So, like, as far as smaller retailers, Monday's a great day to call them. A lot of people do email now, but you know what? Email allows them to not respond to you ever, or 2 weeks from now. Or, there's no kind of like, you know, I'm old school where I like the phone. I'm not good on the phone, but I like the phone. It's really important. It's harder when you're dealing though with the big stores, the big department stores. You know, it's hard to get those buyers on the phone because a lot of times they're out. Always email, but find out who their assistant buyer is. Because normally, a lot of the times, the assistant buyer is managing most of the business and most of their schedule and all of that. And develop that relationship with them, because also a lot of the times, they're just starting too. And they want to start developing their own relationship. So it's a good approach also. But, you know, get into the stores. Like, target some of the stores if they're local and you can go to them. Go in. Shop the store a little bit, talk to the owner, you know, casually be like, oh, you know, I'm actually in the industry too, I have this, because you break down that barrier of like, hey, I'm trying to sell you something, you know, like go in face to face. But, you know, the key is not to be so salesy and pitchy. Be confident, you know what you're going to be talking about, but have realistic expectations. But just because they say no one time doesn't mean you can't follow up and revisit. You want to be aggressive but not pushy.
You know,
I think that's super, super important.
yeah, I was going to say on his point, when you go in and break down that barrier, more importantly, they love the fact that you're designing the product, that you're not the salesperson, you're the designer, and you're showing it emotionally to them. They appreciate that. And I would start off small. Don't go right to the big guys. Don't go to the big guys. They want to see that product selling in the very cool image retailers, the smaller ones first, before they take a chance on their open to buy on the big stuff. So don't be intimidated by the big guys right now. Just walk in, get into these little stores strategically, get into the right stores, and then it's going to, listen, these big guys, these big buyers, they shop those little stores. They see what's trending. They're in there all the time. So start there and then kind of work your way up. When you get to these big guys and you say the name of your company, they're going to know who it is.
Fellas, thank you so much.